Hello, viewers. Wuthering Height, the novel of Emily Bronte, one of the Bronte's sisters. This is Wuthering Height, a novel which still dominated the minds of literary people. So, Emily Bronte is a well-known novelist. She is included in Bronte's sister. And today I'm going to discuss with you about the Wuthering Height. Wuthering Height, this is the story of Mr. Lockwood, an out-of-tower renting an estate called Thrushcross Grange. Twice visit his landlord, Mr. Heathcliff, who lives at a nearby manor called Wuthering Heights. During the first visit, Heathcliff is gruff but compelling. During the second, Lockwood meets other mysterious residents of Wuthering Height, is attacked by dogs when he tries to leave, and endures a ghostly visitation overnight. Lockwood asks the housekeeper at the Grange, Ellen Dean, as famous as Neely, to tell him about Heathcliff and Wuthering Height. She recounts a complicated story of two families, the Earnshaw and the Lintons. Mr. Earnshaw, a gentleman, owns Wuthering Height. He owns it. This Wuthering Height is a place. He has two children, Hindley and Catherine, and adopts a third one, Heathcliff. Heathcliff is not actually his real son. Hindley is jealous of Heathcliff, the one of the sons of... So he's jealous of Heathcliff because both his father and his sister are very fond of youngsters. To avoid strife, Mr. Earnshaw sends Hindley away to college, during which time Catherine and Heathcliff become extremely close. Mr. Earnshaw dies, and Hindley, with a new wife, returns to claim Wuthering Height. Still bitter, Hindley forces Heathcliff to give up his education and treats him like a servant. Hindley's wife dies soon after giving birth to a baby boy, Hareton. However, Hindley descends into alcoholism, though he continues to abuse and mistreat Heathcliff. Meanwhile, Heathcliff and Catherine grow interested in the Lintons, a well-to-do family who live at Thrushcross Grange, a nearby place. The Lintons have two children, Edgar and Isabella, who seem very cultured and refined to some wild inhabitant of Wuthering Height. After suffering an injury while spying on the Lintons, Catherine Earnshaw spends 5 weeks with the Linton, becoming close to Edgar. She finds Edgar's wealth and blondie beauty enticing, yet her feeling for Heathcliff are far more passionate. Even so, Catherine tells Neely that she can't marry Heathcliff because of how Hindley has degraded him. Heathcliff overhears Catherine and flees Wuthering Height that night. In Heathcliff's absence, a devastated Catherine marries Edgar Linton and moves to Thrushcross Grange. All is well until Heathcliff returns, now rich and dignified, but just as wild and furious. Catherine is thrilled to see Heathcliff again. Edgar doesn't share her excitement. He tries to keep them apart, but Catherine continues to see Heathcliff despite her husband's disapproval. Heathcliff, meanwhile, moves into Wuthering Height. Hindley, who has become a gambler, welcomes Heathcliff into his home because he lusts her after Heathcliff's money. Soon after, Catherine reveals to Heathcliff that Isabella has a crush on him. Not long after that, she observed the two of them embracing. The developing romance leads to a conflict between Edgar and Heathcliff, after which Edgar demands that Catherine choose between the two of them. Catherine responds by locking herself into a room and refusing to eat for 3 days. On the third day, she is frenzied and delusional and believes herself near death. That same night, Heathcliff elopes with Isabella. Edgar nurses Catherine for 2 months. Her health improves somewhat, though not completely. She also discovered that she is pregnant. At Wuthering Height, Heathcliff treats Isabella terribly from the moment after their wedding. Edgar, however, refused to have any contact with Isabella and fears that Heathcliff wed Isabella solely as a way to try to take Thrushcross Grange from the Lintons. 2 months after the wedding, Heathcliff, concerned about Catherine's health, pays a surprise visit to Thrushcross Grange with Edgar is away. In a tearful reunion, Heathcliff and Catherine profess their continuation and an eternal love for each other. But Edgar soon returns and Catherine collapses. That night, Catherine gives birth to a girl, Cathy, and dies a few hours later. Catherine is buried in a spot overlooking the moors where she used to play with Heathcliff as a child. 2 days later, Isabella escaped from Wuthering Height and got to town outside London, where she gave birth to Heathcliff's son, Linton. Hindley dies 6 months later, so deeply in debt to Heathcliff that Heathcliff becomes the owner of Wuthering Height. Heathcliff then places Hareton into the same kind of servitude and to which Hindley once placed them. 12 years pass. Cathy grows into a beautiful young woman, while Hareton grows into a rough youth. Isabella dies and Edgar brings Linton back to Thrushcross Grange, but Heathcliff insists that Linton come to live with him at Wuthering Height. Heathcliff then carefully and deliberately cultivates a friendship between the weak and spineless Linton and strong-willed Cathy. Though Edgar at first forbids Cathy from seeing Linton at all, as his own health fails, his own health fails, he relents and allows her to meet with Linton at Thrushcross Grange or on the moors. One day, while meeting with Linton on the moors, Heathcliff forces Cathy and Neely to return with him and Linton to Wuthering Height. He confesses Cathy and Neely in the house until Cathy marries Linton. While she ultimately does, Cathy escapes from Wuthering Height long enough to be with her father as he dies, but is soon taken back to Wuthering Height by Heathcliff. Edgar is buried next to Catherine. Linton dies soon after that, and Heathcliff, because of careful legal maneuvering, now owns both Wuthering Height and Thrushcross Grange. Cathy reluctantly lives with Heathcliff and Hareton, while whom she constantly mocks for his illiteracy. At Wuthering Height, this brings the story back to the present, when Lockwood has rented Thrushcross Grange. Lockwood goes back to London but passes through the region 6 months later. Much to everyone's surprise, Cathy and Hareton have fallen in love. Cathy has realized Hareton's nobility and kindness beneath his lack of education. Heathcliff, who sees strong resemblance in both Hareton and Cathy to Catherine, no longer feels the need for revenge. He dies and is buried beside Catherine on the site opposite where Edgar is buried. Kathy and Harrington, at last free of interfering adults, plan to marry and move to Cross Grange. So this is the story of this Wuthering Height, a wild, passionate story of intense and almost demonic love between Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff. This is the story of, and this novel is divided into many chapters on very famous. Many movie has been made about this novel, Wuthering Height. So the character involved in this novel, the main principal character, Earnshaw, owner of Wuthering Height, Catherine, his daughter, Hindley, his son, Heathcliff, a waif, Mr. Linton, owner of Cross Grange, Mrs. Linton, his wife, Isabella, their daughter, Edgar, their son, Francis Earnshaw, Hindley's wife, Harrington Earnshaw, son of Francis and Hindley, and Catherine Linton, daughter of Catherine Earnshaw and Edgar Linton, Heathcliff, son of Isabella Linton and Heathcliff, Mr. Lockwood. These are the characters. And this novel is divided into between two families, the Earnshaws and the Linton, Mr. and Mrs. Earnshaw and Mr. and Mrs. Linton. They, Hindley, Francis, Catherine, they belong to Earnshaw family. And Linton, Isabella, these are Edgar, Linton, they belong to the Lintons. So this is the story of love, the story of revenge, the story of retaliation and hatred. The Wuthering Height, one of the very famous novel of its time, and still it is famous, written by Emily Bronte, The Wuthering Height. I hope, and the hero of this novel is Heathcliff, a man of stormy, untrained nature, brought as a child to Wuthering Height, how he had taken his revenge, how he was humiliated when he was a child, then later on he taken his revenge from these people, and along with love, revenge, hatred, and the doom of them. This is the story of Wuthering Height. I hope you will enjoy it. Thank you very much.